Hello, this is Hoop again. I'd like to briefly discuss dispatchers. Now, if you are already a transporter, you already are aware of dispatchers. If you're thinking about being a transporter or moving vehicles for a living, you need to know about dispatchers. A dispatcher is a very special person who has been ripped from a normal life and glued, screwed, nailed, chained, or just weighted down behind a computer screen. He leads a very lonely life, and his only job is to take crap from every direction, every single person he comes in contact with, and move little objects from one side of his screen to the other. Now, moving of that object from one side of the screen, which is a delivery object, to the delivered or assigned object, that's you, the transporter. All he cares about is getting that from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen. He doesn't really care how much of a pain in the butt or how dangerous it is for you. His job has got nothing to do with you. It's got just the fact of moving these little objects from one side to the other. So don't take it personally. He won't, I don't think, he won't intentionally lie to you, but the things that he doesn't tell you, or that you're not smart enough to ask, right up front, are the things that are going to bite you right in the butt. Seriously. Just for example, we're taking a load out of Chicago. It's going into LA. Sounds like a great load. So we run our little butts from the middle of Indiana up to Chicago. No big deal. Half a day. We get there and find out, now you've already accepted the load, right? You're going to take the load there for X amount of dollars. You find out the load is not going to be ready for 2.5 days. You took the load. You got to sit there and wait for this stupid truck to get the tires on it, or the crane on it, or the fire extinguisher, whatever it is, that, or the part that's missing out of the motor for the 2.5 days. You got to sit there for the 2.5 days. Now, they forgot to mention that it has to be delivered in 7 days. So if you subtract 2.5 days from 7 days, that doesn't leave you a legal time to get that vehicle there, but you already agreed to it. Now you forgot to ask, who the heck is paying the interstate fees for this truck? Who's paying the expenses? Who's paying the tolls? Also, you have to ask or make sure before you accept this load. Before you accept the load, you must make sure who's paying what. And you must sit down and figure out what is the distance of this load, because many dispatchers will, from point A to point B, there are many a slip between the cup and the lip. So if they call on their GPS for Chicago, they used to, at least, and I've caught them before, use the far near edge of Chicago and then the far near edge of Los Angeles. Well, between the two of them, you can have 60 miles difference from where you picked that up to where you dropped it off. But you agreed to it, so you're going to be screwed out of those miles. You have to make sure you ask the questions. When is the load available? Who pays the tolls? What is the exact distance from pickup to drop off? Who's going to pay the interstate charges, like New Mexico and that, depending on what vehicle you have? You can be charged $80 to $250 just to get it into that state. Other states, you have to pay, like Oregon, you have to pay a fuel tax. For how many miles you drove that truck, they figure out how many miles a gallon it gets, and they charge you a road and a fuel tax in and out of the state. And you have to know that you have to have that permit 24 hours before you enter the state to tell them. If they stop you, you're going to spend some time in cell block D with a great big guy named Bubba, who's led a very lonely life also. So the questions you ask are the ones that will save your butt. The questions you don't ask, or don't know enough to ask, or they knew enough not to tell you, those are the ones that are going to bite you right slam in the butt. Now, to go over it again, the dispatcher, I don't think intentionally means you any harm. but he's got a very lonely and a tough job getting crap from every direction. Drivers, owners, managers, the equipment owner, the mechanics. So he's got a crappy job to begin with, and he, I guess, doesn't mind passing it on to the driver, because you'll have to admit it from the beginning, you are the lower end of the food chain. Now, don't totally get me wrong, there are a very few dispatchers out here, and I think they used to be drivers also. But there are very few drivers that you can count, the whole world, you can count them on one hand, that actually care for you. They'll look out for you, you'll do them favors, they'll do you favors, they'll save your butt, you'll save their butt. And it is a joy to work with them. But don't expect to meet them very often, because they're very few and far between. They were drivers usually themselves, and they know what it's like to try to live out here on the road and make a living at doing this crazy job. But if you like to travel, there's no crazier job to be in, because I have traveled pretty much 90% of all the interstates on an atlas of US and Canada. I've probably traveled 45% of all the red roads on that map, and maybe 15% of the black roads. So you're talking about over 100,000 miles a year delivering equipment.